Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's day 2 of Xi Jinping's peace mission in Russia. The Chinese president is trying to play mediator. He wants to end the war in Ukraine, but will he find any takers? There have been developments in Crimea, a major explosion. The Ukrainians have not taken responsibility, but we're waiting to see how this changes the story. The Russian president has not revealed his cards yet. Tomorrow is Xi Jinping's last day in Moscow. Meanwhile, the Americans have come out with a human rights report. It's the same old spiel. They are lecturing the whole world about what to do with human rights. It talks about every country but the United States of America. And we wonder why other countries do not publish such reports featuring the US. But we've done it for them tonight. We bring you a report on human rights in the US. Also, the banking crisis. A new study shows what we've seen so far is just the tip of the iceberg, could just be the tip of the iceberg. It says more than 180 banks in America could be in trouble. And a special story from Afghanistan. The Taliban are quiet quitting. We'll tell you why. The headlines first. The Netanyahu government climbs down over judicial reforms and unprecedented protests. The Israeli Prime Minister announces a softening of stand. But the opposition has rejected his pitch. It says it will challenge the proposal in Israel's Supreme Court. After India, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida arrives in Kiev. He will hold talks with Ukrainian President Zelensky. The Japanese Prime Minister is the last G7 leader to visit the war-torn country. The American state of Idaho could soon allow prisoner executions by a firing squad. Lawmakers approve a bill that would permit it if no lethal injection is available. This would be the 5th US state to approve death by a firing squad. Some relief for Imran Khan. The former Prime Minister of Pakistan gets protective bail from the Lahore High Court in 2 cases of terrorism, but he faces many others. And a big blow to one of China's biggest online retailers. Google suspends the popular shopping app Pinduoduo after detecting malware in its software. It's day 2 of Xi Jinping's visit to Moscow. He met Putin informally yesterday, and today the two leaders met again. But the meeting was overshadowed by this. What you saw was an explosion in Crimea. Russian cruise missiles were destroyed and Russia's Black Sea Fleet has been hit. That's because the cruise missiles were designed to be launched from those ships. Russia says it was a drone attack. Ukraine's defense ministry has confirmed the explosion, but it has not taken responsibility for the attack. If a Ukrainian hand is proven, it will be an escalation, a daring attack deep inside what is now Russian territory. And remember the timing of the strike. The Chinese president is in Russia. He has come with a peace plan. Xi Jinping presented the plan to Putin yesterday, and Putin said, "We are ready to talk."
We have carefully studied your proposals on setting the acute crisis in Ukraine. You're also well aware that we are always open for negotiation process. We will discuss all these issues, including your initiatives.
We are always open for negotiation, says the Russian president. But that was yesterday. Will his tone change today after the Crimea explosion? Putin met Xi Jinping for formal talks, and as always, he spoke in riddles.
It's obvious that President Putin and President Xi discussed Beijing's 12-point peace plan for Ukraine because they said they would discuss it. If you remember, Putin said so last night. I will not be giving any assessments. Let us wait for the statements from the media.
Which brings us to Xi Jinping. What is his peace plan? And what does China want? For starters, Beijing is pushing for a ceasefire, followed by peace talks between both sides. Of course, that's something that China hopes to oversee. They've not said it on record so far, but if you go through the statements in the Chinese press, you get the picture. China has been talking about an end to hostilities and a ceasefire in Ukraine. But it's easier said than done. There are clear stumbling blocks for China here. First of all, Ukraine may not agree, because a ceasefire would mean loss of territory for them. It would be advantage Russia. And the West most likely will not be on board. The US is already talking about it. It says a ceasefire will go in Putin's favor and leave Russian forces inside Ukraine.
But we are concerned that instead, China will reiterate calls for a ceasefire that leaves Russian forces inside Ukraine's sovereign territory. Any ceasefire that does not address the removal of Russian forces from Ukraine would effectively ratify Russia's illegal conquests.
The US thinks a ceasefire will help Putin buy time, that it will help Russian forces regroup and possibly launch a bigger offensive later. But all this is on expected lines. What's interesting, though, is the Ukrainian response. Zelensky has been keen to talk to the Chinese president. The two leaders have not spoken since the war began, not even once. And reports say Xi Jinping may call up Zelensky soon. It could be a virtual meeting. The dates have not been announced formally, but there's a lot of buzz. The call may happen after Xi leaves Moscow. The question is, why is Zelensky keen to engage with Xi Jinping? And the answer is, why not? He has some compelling reasons, like Chinese money. It's a trap in the long run, but for a country battered by war, Chinese investment can help in rebuilding. Also, pushing China away comes with its own risks. Beijing could double down on its support to Russia. It could share more military aid, even lethal arms. So Zelensky might want to get a foot in that door, at least make himself heard. And it's not like he's very firm on principles. He's happy to do business with anyone who gives him money and arms. He's working with the Pakistanis, for God's sake. We'll talk about it. So China would be welcome. The Ukrainian president has not criticized the Chinese proposals. He has dropped hints that he would like to discuss them. But can Zelensky influence China's outcomes? More importantly, how much importance would China give to Zelensky, especially when Vladimir Putin is on the other side? Tomorrow is Xi Jinping's last day in Moscow. Will he be able to change the course of this war? Can the dragon play peacemaker? As much as the world wants peace, I'm sure many are betting on him to fail. And now let's talk about the Ukraine-Pakistan nexus. Western powers played the matchmakers, and this is how it turned out. Pakistan is the latest country to pledge tanks to Ukraine. Reports say Pakistan will send 44 tanks. These are the T-80UD tanks. Earlier, Pakistan reportedly sent 10,000 rockets to Kiev. Does this mean that Pakistan has suddenly sprouted some conscience? That the nation which has waged 3 territorial wars against India suddenly feels that military land grabs are wrong? Rest assured, that's not the case. This is Pakistan trying to appease the West, specifically trying to keep the US happy to pave the way for bailout funds. Remember, Pakistan is going through a crippling economic crisis. It desperately needs funds from the IMF, but that money has not come in yet. So Pakistan is trying to portray itself as a Western ally. It helps that Islamabad has a long history of military cooperation with Kiev. Since the Soviet Union broke up in 1991, Ukraine and Pakistan have been in business. Between 1991 and 2020, they've had defense contracts worth $1.6 billion. Pakistan has bought about 320 tanks from Ukraine. Again, these are the T-80UD tanks. They're upgraded versions of the Soviet-era T-80 tanks. And what Pakistan is doing now is just returning some of them. So it's sending tanks, it has already sent rockets, and it's also facilitating Ukraine's Western allies, the UK, for instance. Reports say the UK used Pakistani air bases to send military equipment to Ukraine. We told you about this last month. Pakistan's ports, too, are being used to ship containers carrying arms. They arrive in Germany and Poland, and from there, they're sent to the front lines in Ukraine. So Pakistan provides both air and sea routes for arms and also military equipment. It makes Pakistan sound like an invaluable ally to the West. Perhaps even an ally the West cannot allow to fail. Which then brings us to the question, why is Pakistan cozying up to the West again? Does Islamabad not have China's backing? Well, it does, but probably not as much as it would like. China has been hesitant about pumping more money into Pakistan. It has halted some infrastructure projects. These were part of the Belt and Road Initiative. China has been frustrated by the delays, not to mention the attacks on Chinese assets. And it's not just China. Pakistan's Gulf allies are also tired. Their promises of aid have become sporadic, and it makes sense. How much good money will be thrown after bad, especially when it doesn't benefit the Pakistani people? The lion's share of this money is taken up by the military. So now Pakistan is finally back to appeasing the West, and this time it's using its military stockpiles to appeal for aid. And for once we say, it could be a decent move. Pakistan could do with pruning its armed forces. And for once, its defense supplies could actually end up being used for defense. But if Pakistan's moves do result in a bailout, the West will prove that it never learns. Do you remember the war on terror? The US invading Afghanistan to find Osama bin Laden. Years spent conducting a manhunt, only for him to be found in Pakistan. America's invaluable strategic partner in the war on terror, harboring America's most wanted terrorist. And bin Laden was not the only one. Pakistan provided a safe haven to the Taliban, the Haqqanis who killed American soldiers. Pakistan kept playing a double game. Between 2002 and 2015, the West gave it $31 billion in aid. $31 billion to fight their war on terror. And what did they get in return? Body bags and a Taliban regime in Kabul. Now they're partnering with the very same Pakistan to fight the war in Ukraine. You know what they say? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Well, fill in the blanks. Now let's talk about Sri Lanka. It's finally getting that bailout. The International Monetary Fund has made the announcement Colombo will get $3 billion. It has taken nearly 1 year, and Sri Lanka has gone through hell. The country defaulted on its debts. Its reserves were dangerously low. There was runaway inflation, seemingly endless blackouts, acute shortage of essentials, and long lines for fuel. It led to the ouster of the powerful Rajapaksas. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had to flee the country. Protesters took over his official residence, that's the president's house. Then a change of guard took place, and assistance from India helped in stabilizing the island. There is some semblance of order now, but Sri Lanka is not out of the woods yet, far from it. First, let's tell you about the bailout. The IMF has approved a $3 billion loan program. It will run for 3 years. Sri Lanka will get $333 million. This is the first tranche of funds, $333 million. It will be transferred in the next few days, and the rest of the money will follow over the course of 3 years. In all, it will be disbursed in 9 tranches. The current president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, shared the good news. He said that Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt country.
Sri Lanka බංකොලොත් රටක් හැටියට
Sri Lanka is no longer a bankrupt nation. Therefore, we can restart normal transactions. As our foreign exchange situation improves, we'll gradually roll back import restrictions. Essential goods, medicine, and things needed for the tourist industry will be in the first round.
ක්‍රමානුකූලව ඉවත් කරන්නට යනවා.
But the loan comes with strings attached. Colombo had to agree to a slew of changes for this bailout. This is what Sri Lanka will have to do: increase its tax base, slash subsidies on imported goods, and reduce corruption. And Colombo has no option but to do all of this. The disbursement of the IMF loan is tied to these steps. And the IMF will conduct a review every 6 months. It has spelled out its expectations quite clearly.
This is a very ambitious program. It's clearly very ambitious, and implementation will be key. The one factor here is that there is broad recognition across the political spectrum of the need for reforms, given the situation in economic situation in Sri Lanka. So that gives us belief that that there will be progress made on these reforms, and the government will deliver on the remaining reforms.
But the money from the IMF will not be enough. Sri Lanka will have to raise more funds to stabilize its economy. And where will that money come from? Colombo is working on some plans. It wants to restructure state-owned enterprises. It wants to privatize Sri Lankan Airlines, which is their national carrier. There's also an urgent need to restructure debts, and that is the immediate challenge. Sri Lanka has to present a restructuring strategy, which means reworking the terms of national debt, the monthly payments, and the interest rates. All of it has to be reworked. As of December 2022, Sri Lanka owed $84 billion. This is Colombo's total outstanding public debt, $84 billion. Some of those payments are due already. Sri Lanka has to pay $2 billion. This money is due to multilateral lenders in the first half of this year, $2 billion. But repaying debts is the last thing that Colombo wants to do right now. It is looking for a 10-year moratorium, a 10-year exemption on all foreign debt. It's a tall ask. Sri Lanka will have to convince all its lenders. And the most problematic one will be China. On that front, Colombo is already struggling. There's a sharp focus on Chinese loans. Do you know how much money Sri Lanka owes to China? As of December 2022, Beijing was owed $7.4 billion. That's almost 20% of Sri Lanka's total public debt. And what about loan waivers? Well, Beijing is a shark. It has been non-committal on waiving loans. In fact, Sri Lanka's Foreign Minister Ali Sabri was asked about this. He was asked if China would consider writing off some loans. I have his response. This is what he said. We have the will to pay, but we don't have the capacity to pay. What we are now trying to do is get that capacity back. That's going to be a very difficult and serious discussion. He said it. It's going to be difficult. And dealing with lenders like China is just one part of the Lankan government's challenge. It also has to win back the confidence of its people. Recent days have seen fresh protests. 5 days ago, unions in Sri Lanka went on a strike. Workers from hospitals, schools, and the railways protested. They wanted a wage hike. The government passed an order banning all strikes. It made such protests illegal. The order was controversial, to say the least. The government got a lot of flack for it. President Wickremesinghe now faces a dual test: reviving the economy while keeping his country together. It's that time of the year again. The US has released its annual human rights report. Human rights in other countries, of course. The report is out, and nothing in it stands out, except for the breathtaking hypocrisy of America. It talks about Russian war crimes in Ukraine. It talks about Iran's crackdown on anti-hijab protesters, China and its treatment of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, the horrors of the Myanmar military. It covers pretty much every country in the world, including India, and it shows how America is stuck in a time warp. It still sees itself as the sole superpower, and it's still tone deaf. The section about India is almost the same as the last year. Paragraphs have been lifted almost verbatim from the 2021 report. The only new criticism seems to be the bulldozing of homes. The rest remains the same. And just like last year, most nations are likely to refute this report, which begs the question, why make it at all? And this is not some random American report we're talking about. This one comes from the US State Department. It has the government stamp of approval. It is a report on all countries receiving American assistance and all United Nations member states. These reports are submitted to the US Congress, and this is legally mandated by the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 and the Trade Act of 1974. You could say the American law mandates that they sit in judgment of the world. Now, how accurate are these reports? It depends on who you ask. Look at the case of Saudi Arabia, a long-standing ally of the US, but not towing Washington's line off late. How does America get Riyadh back in line? Just bring up their human rights record. And for a country that has appointed itself the class monitor on human rights, how does America's own record look? You won't find the answers in this report because the US chose not to include itself. Now, ideally, India or any of these other countries should be releasing a report on human rights in the US, but they don't. They don't go beyond the odd word of condemnation, so we decided to do the honors. Here's a report on human rights in the US. We'll start with the most recent controversy. The Biden administration wanted to share details of Russian war crimes with the International Criminal Court. Guess who blocked it? The Pentagon. The reason? The Pentagon was afraid that it would set a precedent for American war crimes to be probed in the same court. And I'm not making this up. The Pentagon is so afraid of what war crime trials will lead to that it won't allow the ICC to prosecute Russia, its own enemy. It makes you wonder just how horrific the US military's actions have been over the years. And speaking of the US military, the world is again talking about the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. It's been 20 years. The two nations have been devastated. And now this video has gone viral. It's from 2020. It shows a US war veteran confronting Joe Biden. Just listen to him.
We're just wondering why we should vote for someone who voted for a war and killed thousands of our brothers and sisters. Countless Iraqi civilians. You enabled that. You also gave a medal to the man who enabled that war and caused that war. Your blood is on your hands as well. And you're disqualified.
You sent us to harm civilians, he says. The story gets worse when you focus on human rights. A certain Guantanamo Bay episode comes to mind. It's the infamous offshore torture chamber operated by the US in Cuba. They call it Gitmo. The images of abuse shocked the world. America promised to shut it down, but it hasn't. And why do they have it in Cuba? Because such torture is not allowed on American soil, so they do it anyway in Cuba, and they don't mention it in the human rights report featuring Cuba either. We wonder why. Also, speaking of torture, we are reminded of Abu Ghraib. It was a prison in Iraq where locals were tortured. The images sent shockwaves through the world, a blinding testimony of how America honors human rights. Did the perpetrators face justice? How many high-ranking officials were allowed to go scot-free? How about an annual report on this? And I can go on. There's ingrained racism and police brutality, the gun terror. It's the only country in the world where you're more likely to be killed by a teenager than a terrorist. Children are shot dead in schools in America. There are dystopian gender controls like the abortion law. How is all of this not an affront to human life and dignity? And look, the US is free to make its annual human rights report. But these reports are not made with the aim of fixing any of this. America is weaponizing human rights, and it's appalling. It reeks of US hypocrisy. Meanwhile, America's banking crisis is still hurting the world. 2 American banks failed earlier this month, and this is the fallout. America's biggest banks have taken a hit. The big 4 banks lost $52 billion. Global markets suffered losses too. This month, they've lost as much as $1 trillion. A major bank in Europe has been sold. Credit Suisse is being bought by rival UBS. The deal was engineered by the Swiss government. Now, the world often talks about America's military firepower and how lethal its weapons can be. But US banks can be just as lethal. In 2008, remember, they triggered a global financial crisis, and now they've caused yet another meltdown. The worst might be yet to come. A new report says that as many as 186 banks in the US could be in trouble. 186 banks. This is the finding of a study done by 4 American economists. They say more than 180 banks could, quote unquote, go the way of Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley Bank, or SVB, is based in San Francisco. It's where the entire crisis began. It was the first American bank to collapse. It had run out of money. The bank did not have enough money to pay its depositors. Now imagine the same happening to 186 banks. Apparently, they have the same problems, a high level of uninsured deposits and a significant drop of government bonds. We've told you about this before. These banks bought government securities, government bonds. They're considered a safe bet, a good investment. So the money that people deposit in banks was parked in these bonds. But soon the value of these bonds declined. That's because America's central bank, the US Federal Reserve, jacked up interest rates. It brought new bonds into the market, and they offered better interest rates. So the old bonds became worthless. They lost their value. And the banks which are under pressure still hold a sizable number of the old bonds. SVB dumped its bonds at a loss. It had no other option. It had to pay the depositors. The bank lost almost $2 billion in that transaction. Ultimately, it collapsed. What happens if the same story repeats at 186 banks? Needless to say, the losses will be massive. In fact, I have a copy of the study with me. Listen to what it says. Even if only half of uninsured depositors decide to withdraw, almost 190 banks are at a potential risk of impairment to even insured depositors, with potentially $300 billion of insured deposits at risk. If uninsured deposit withdrawals even cause even small fire sales, substantially more banks are at risk. So $300 billion would be at risk, and it may have a ripple effect. That's what the study is saying. Already one more American bank is teetering. It's called First Republic. Its stock has been losing value. In 2 weeks, it has slumped by 90%. A few days ago, 11 banks stepped in to save First Republic. They injected $30 billion in cash. It was supposed to be a lifeline, but it hasn't helped. The cash infusion could not calm investors. The value of the stock is still falling. Wall Street CEOs are in a huddle, trying to come up with a new plan. If other banks are at risk, 180 others, like this report says, it wouldn't take a lot of time for the crisis to spread to other markets. This, remember, is the worst case scenario. We can only hope it doesn't come to this. And we have some good news from Kashmir. A region which suffered decades of terrorism is finally enjoying the fruits of peace. Investors are turning to Kashmir. This was unimaginable just a few years ago. Today, Kashmir is a tourist hotspot, and it's attracting foreign investment. Dubai's Emaar Group will invest a total of 500 crore rupees. This includes a mega mall project and IT towers to be set up in Jammu and Srinagar. It's significant, A, because of the money and development that will follow, and B, because this is a vote of confidence from an Arab nation for India's vision of Kashmir. So how did a terror-infested valley become an investor destination? Our next report tells you.
अनुच्छेद 370 के सभी खंड लागू नहीं होंगे सिवाय खंड 1 के.
It was August 2019. The government of India revoked Jammu and Kashmir's special status by abrogating Article 370. Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh were made two separate union territories governed by the Indian government. And with this move, the story of Kashmir changed forever. Today, Kashmir is attracting global investors. The first big player is the United Arab Emirates. A group called Emaar is turning to Kashmir. This is the same group that built the Burj Khalifa. Now, Emaar is making a $60 million investment in Kashmir. That's close to 500 crore rupees. They will build a shopping mall and an IT tower in Srinagar. Construction is expected to be completed by 2026. Kashmir's administration says this is the first FDI investment in the region. The mall will be spread over an area of 1 million square feet. It is expected to generate 7,000 to 8,000 jobs. The mall will have more than 500 shops, most of which will be operated by UAE-based companies. And this investment has not come out of the blue. Some structural changes have been made to Jammu and Kashmir. After the abrogation of Article 370, the Union Territory became subject to 890 central laws. Around 250 state laws have been eliminated and another 130 have been amended. In 2021, Jammu and Kashmir administration announced a new industrial development scheme. This is worth more than 28,400 crore rupees. The goal is simple: to encourage investment and take industrial development to the block level. In the same year, investments started pouring in. Kashmir attracted investments worth $2.5 billion in 2021. Last year, the figure shot up to more than $15 billion. And in the last 2 years, Jammu and Kashmir has received investment proposals from more than 5,000 companies. The UAE is one country that is very upbeat about investing in Kashmir. In January last year, it agreed to deliver projects worth over $1 billion in the valley. These include the development of industrial parks, a medical college, a specialty hospital, logistics centers, IT and multi-purpose towers. Remember, this is an Islamic nation investing in India's vision of Kashmir. It's a huge vote of confidence for the government and a setback to the Pakistanis. Investor confidence in Kashmir is a direct fallout of the improved security situation there. Kashmir is now relatively safe. 16 million tourists flocked to the valley last year, and now the UAE's big investment will have a domino effect. Emaar CEO Amit Jain said the investors should take a cue from the Emirati group. He said, and I quote, "This is the start. We should inspire people. People should aspire to follow us." Not very long ago, Kashmir was a region which made news for terror attacks and stone pelting. Today it is in the headlines as a destination for investors. It's a win for India. And now to tensions in the Korean Peninsula. We've got dramatic visuals from North Korea. The tin pot dictatorship seems to be preparing for war. What you see is the Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile. North Korea calls it the monster missile. It's the biggest in their arsenal. It can hit targets anywhere in the US. The images are powerful and the messaging is stern. North Korea is on a missile launching spree, and with each launch, it raises tensions in the peninsula. On Monday, the matter reached the United Nations Security Council, the body that debates everything but fails to change anything. It debated the Korean crisis too. Who is to blame for the rising tensions? That was the debate. The House, much like the world, was divided into two blocks. The US-led West and the Russia-China axis in the East. The UNSC discussion became a sparring contest. North Korea found two powerful backers, Russia and China, both permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, both with a veto power. Their support for North Korea enraged the US, and it did not pull any punches. Washington accused China and Russia of quote-unquote encouraging Pyongyang's missile launches. It said they were shielding North Korea from more sanctions.
We remain committed to diplomacy, and to that end, the Security Council must overcome its prolonged silence and speak out against the DPRK's destabilizing violations. The DPRK is testing the Council's resolve and purpose, and the Council must act.
And here's how Russia responded.
At the same time, we continue to see increasingly hawkish rhetoric. The intensity of the military exercises carried out by the United States and their allies goes unabated. On March 13th, the Freedom Shield, US and South Korea began exercises. A whole range of field exercises will also begin next week.
Meanwhile, China blamed the US for the rising tensions. It said America is being dangerous and hypocritical. Now, we agree, it is. But China should be the last one to lecture anyone on being dangerous or hypocritical. And China and Russia also brought up the AUKUS, you know, the military alliance between Australia, the UK and the US, the one that is giving nuclear submarines to Australia. China and Russia said the AUKUS was adding to the tensions. Meanwhile, the US and South Korea are holding joint drills. They call it the Freedom Shield. Everything is Hollywood, apparently. It's an 11-day exercise. It covers every possible scenario of war in the Korean Peninsula. And it's the largest one to be conducted in 5 years. Freedom Shield has rattled North Korea. Kim Jong-un has called for nuclear attack readiness. China has defended his missile launches. In fact, missiles have become synonymous with North Korea. And on Monday, Pyongyang made a big claim. It said more than 1.4 million people have enlisted in the military, and that they've joined to defend their country against America and other enemies. On Friday, remember, Pyongyang had said that it had enrolled over 800,000 citizens in the military. The state media is at pains to prove that all of this is voluntary. It says people want to, quote-unquote, unify the two Koreas and mercilessly wipe out the war maniacs. They tend to use dramatic language. They accused, and I'm quoting, US imperialists and the South Korean puppet traitors of trying to provoke a nuclear war. Amid this blame game, the US is preparing to slap more sanctions. The existing sanctions have already isolated North Korea from the rest of the world. It's called the Hermit Kingdom for a reason. And in defiance, it keeps firing more missiles. Pyongyang conducted more than 60 missile tests in 2022. And this year, it has already launched more than 17 missiles, 17. Some of these involved a single missile being fired, others saw multiple projectiles. Meanwhile, the Chinese and the Russians continue to add fuel to the fire. The fact of the matter is, neither side is playing a constructive role here. The Korean Peninsula is turning into a ticking time bomb. And now let's talk about the fall of a British institution. No, we're not referring to the BBC or the Royals. We're talking about the Metropolitan Police, commonly referred to as the Met. It is responsible for law enforcement in Greater London, but it's unable to police itself. Why do we say this? Because discrimination is baked into it. It is guilty of institutional racism, misogyny, and homophobia. It has a bullying culture. Listen to this. One Muslim officer had bacon stuffed in his boots. A Sikh officer had his beard cut. And this was a prank. It was supposed to be funny. But do you know what's not funny? just how broken and rotten the Met Police is. It suffers from collapsing public trust. And these are not our words. An official report says all of this. It has hit the lifeblood of British policing with one of its worst scandals. Here's a report.
In 2021, Britain witnessed a crime that shook the world. A woman named Sarah Everard was abducted from a London street. She was then raped and murdered. Who was the offender? A Metropolitan Police officer. The brutal crime saw massive backlash. It resulted in the Met commissioning a review. The review report has now come out. It does not mince words, and it has rattled the world. It's called the Casey Report because it was conducted by Louise Casey, who is a government official. The 363-page report calls the Met broken and rotten. It says the Met is guilty of institutional racism, misogyny, and homophobia, and that it's suffering from collapsing public trust. Remember, only 50% of the public expressed confidence in the force, even before the report came out, with numbers lower amongst black Londoners. The report also details how crimes are callously covered up. Rapists walk free because of police bungles. The Met lets predators flourish. Sometimes criminals are spawned by the force's toxicity. Several officers turned criminals pass vetting and are given a gun. The report also details disturbing stories of sexual assault. 12% of women in the Met have been harassed or attacked at work. 1/3 have experienced sexism. And senior officers got away despite complaints. The Met is a boys' club, and a disproportionately white one at that. It has a bullying culture. The situation is worse for minority ethnic officers. They are more likely to be disciplined. They have to battle discriminatory pranks. A Muslim officer had bacon stuffed into his shoes. A Sikh officer had his beard cut, while another's turban was put in a shoebox. And the racism is brazen towards the public too. The Met conducts more stop-and-search operations than other UK forces. And this is excessive against black people. In one case, a black schoolgirl was strip-searched by 2 officers while on her period. Black people are 7 times more likely to die after police restraint in Britain. Apart from this, the Met is also institutionally corrupt, and its blindness, arrogance, and prejudice are prevalent. It's failing on so many levels that it faces an existential crisis. But what do those in authority have to say about this? The Forces Commissioner calls it a case of bad apples. He refuses to accept the word institutional. Meanwhile, the London Mayor agrees with the report. He plans to chair a new oversight board for the Met. But words only go so far. This is not the first time that such revelations have been made. And it's scary because the Met makes a quarter of policing done in the UK. But this is hardly a London or even a Britain issue. The decades change, as do the countries, new reviews are published and inadequacies are highlighted. But where is the change? It's an understatement to say that the police system is creating something disastrous. It affects their overworked officers, the public they serve, and the trust they squash every time they manipulate their power. This is partly due to structural problems. There are poorly implemented systems of recruitment, training, vetting, promotion, and an unhealthy competition for resources. The force also battles serious failures of culture and leadership. They cherry-pick reforms which barely do any good, because reversing the fall of the police forces needs a radical shift. They need to be re-engineered in a systematic way. It feels cliché to even say this, but if not now, then when? And at what cost?
And our last story today is about office work. And more than anyone, we think it will make the Americans quite happy. Because office work has done what they could not. It has killed the Taliban, not physically surely, but mentally. Taliban misses the Jihad life. They're now mere bureaucratic cogs, tired of keeping up with office meeting logs. So they're quiet quitting. You know, where you do the bare minimum at work. If you're tired of office work, then you're in the company of some big guns, quite literally. Here's a report.
The lack of ruining innocent lives has hit the Taliban hard. Something is amiss in their lives. Taliban fighters swept back to power less than 2 years ago. They took over Afghanistan's capital, forced the US to withdraw their troops, and rattled the world with horror. But the bloodthirsty terrorists are now stuck behind desks, suffering the 9-to-5 grind, feeling drained at bureaucracy's hand. They're now battling the truly boring job of running an impoverished nation, missing the exhilaration that came with seizing control. This is one area where terrorists are slightly relatable. We all know the thrill of chasing a dream job, which is not as fulfilling in reality. The only difference is some lose the mountain life free of restrictions, and guns are replaced with pieces of junk like slow-working keyboards. And trust us, we're not making this up. A recent study shows that the Taliban is having difficulty adapting to typical civilian life. They're tired of daily things that haunt most mere mortals, like traffic, thieves, and office jobs. How times have changed. The Taliban is complaining about being robbed by common thieves. And they despise desk jobs. Most of them are now quiet quitting or doing the bare minimum at their jobs. Instead of being the harbingers of doom, they're stuck in Twitter's doom scroll. They complain about spending most of their time on Twitter. They've become addicted to the internet. They say they, quote-unquote, miss the Jihad life. The Taliban clearly misses the good things, like causing bloodshed. After all, it's quite the shift from being sadistic, chaotic criminals. How is a desk job supposed to fill the void of imposing draconian rules? Forbidding women from receiving education, and stoning, flogging, and amputating the public routinely. The new life must be quite boring. They now have to work for a wage instead of embarking on victim-hunting journeys, and the problems keep mounting. Here are some anecdotes. They're miserable about not being able to miss work. Being absent leads to cut wages. Some can't bring their family to the city because of high property rates. And if this wasn't enough, they now have to sack relatives they hired in government positions. Along with their tumultuous personal lives, they also face a deepening economic crisis. Their government faces sanctions from countries across the world. Their overseas assets have been frozen, and most of their foreign funding has been suspended. Sure, they claim to be sitting on natural resources like copper and natural gas. It could be worth over $1 trillion, but they struggle with tapping it, especially after a war that killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. Afghanistan's economy is collapsing while it struggles with isolation from the global community and traffic, apparently. The killing machines are now stuck in the monotonous urban machinery. Their daily problems now include Twitter and traffic. The change is difficult. We hope they can keep up, because for most in Afghanistan, confronting traffic is 100 times better than confronting the Taliban on any given day.
And finally, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with France. Police fired tear gas at people protesting against pension reforms. This happened in the city of Bordeaux. The situation remains grim as the French government narrowly survived no confidence votes. Meanwhile, in the United States, a massive fire broke out at a church in New Jersey. People living miles away could see the smoke. Ukrainian ballerinas, who almost gave up on their dream of performing for a live audience, are back on stage in Budapest. And starting today, we'll also bring you shots from history. We're taking you back in time. This one is from March 21st, 2006. Twitter was born with a simple 5-word tweet. Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey tweeted, "Just setting up my Twitter." The spelling he had was TWTTR. He took the vowels out of the word. Very early 2000 of him. Another fun fact, Twitter was originally a side project. So for those of you in college, take your project seriously because you never know. One day Elon Musk may want to buy them. We leave you on that note. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Becoming a UK PM.
Well, it's not like that we are going to get the Kohinoor back. But at least India is on its way to the top, huh?
But Gautam sir, there's actually not much to celebrate.
Why not? An Indian is ruling the UK.
Indian leaders in third countries often tend to overcompensate for their minority handicap.
Key.
For example, Sunak's Home Secretary of Indian origin, Suella Braverman, disapproved of India-UK free trade because it would encourage people immigrating to the UK, and the majority of whom were Indians. Structurally, India and UK have passed baggage, but still hasn't been resolved. And that is why...
Ladies and gentlemen, India needs to significantly temper its expectations from Rishi Sunak. Presenting Vantage with me, Palki Sharma, a first-of-its-kind global show with an Indian perspective.